Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 791. Today we're going to take a look at Life in Reterra. This is a new game that's recently released from Hasbro and designed by Eric Lang and Ken Grohl. This is a 2 to 4 player sort of tile placement game that has lots of kind of variable, configurable types of setups where the tiles that you place out will have different special abilities. There'll be different ways to score them. So there's a lot of kind of replayability in the game. It doesn't take very long to play. A lot of this I'll talk about in the review at the end. But let's go down to the table. It's a very straightforward game. And then after the table, we'll come back up and I'll tell you what I think. Okay, so I've got the game here set up like it would be for a 2-player game. And the main thing that you're looking at here right in kind of the center of the screen is the market. And you can see we've got cards here. These are double-sided. So we've got an orange and a purple side. And then if we take a zoom in here, we can see that based on the player count, for example, here is the farm tiles. So a 2-player count will just fill up to there. And then 3 players will go fill up to here. And then in a 4-player game, you'll fill out this top row here. Now these tiles is pretty handy. They come with several of these little trays here. So we can see we have some other sets of tiles over here like this one here with some other cards. So the card artwork, let's just take the farm again as an example. You can see that's what's depicted there. So that will match here, this particular thing here. And you can see there it's got the matching artwork there. And so you can set this up in a number of different ways. Now, the game kind of comes with 3 different default sets here, all on the purple side. But you can mix and match these. So for example, in the back of the rule book here, you've got what's called the Unfriendly Neighbor set for players who want to mess with their neighbors. And it shows you which cards, purple or orange, you want to lay out there. You got the Peace and Quiet set for a more solitary game and so on. You've got even places here if you want to write this down or photocopy this sheet and write down your kind of own sets across all these cards. So there's 15 different cards and they're double-sided, so multiply by 2. And there's a ton of different combinations that you can get at this. And so these are all what these cards are going to have. You can see you're always going to have 2 different kind of 2 space size tiles, 2 different 3 size tiles, and then 1 kind of square tile that takes up 4 spaces. So you're always going to have that configuration there. But the way they score and the different special abilities and stuff are all going to be kind of different. Now off to the side here, you have kind of your main sort of land tiles. And you'll start off with a hand of these. Everybody will start off with 3 of these. And then you'll always have kind of a display of 5 that you can choose from over the course of your turn. And everybody is going to start with one of these random Life in Reterra tiles here. And you just pick one at random, and this will be your starting tile there. And you're basically going to build out till you have a 4x4 grid of these land tiles. So your turn is very simple. There's even like a little turn reference there at the top right of the market board. Very simple steps. So let's just go through them very quickly. Now your first step is to place out a land tile here. And you can see you've got 3 in your hand, but also you have some off to the side like so. So we'll just pull a couple of these down here. These were off on the row there. So you can either play one from your hand, and these are all the tiles that you'll ever get in your hand, or you can grab one from the board there and place it. And then at the end of your turn, if you grab one from the market off to the side, you'll refresh the market with a new tile there. So you're going to place one of those. And if the land tile that you took has a gear on it, then you can either build a building or you can put out an inhabitant. So there's a little tray here of tokens, which I'll just show you here. So you've got these inhabitants here, and then you have these are either relics or junk. Now relics will score you a victory point for each one on your board there. The junk side will give you -1. But back to this, when you take this and you put down a tile with a gear, you can either put an inhabitant on one of those gears, or you can actually build a building. Now when you build a building, a couple things have to happen. So let's say I just did this and I choose to go ahead and put an inhabitant on that one. Then my next turn comes along, and let's say I choose to place this tile. Well, you can see now, maybe you've intuited this a little bit, I've got 2 gears next to each other and they're in the same terrain type. So now if I wanted, I could build one of these size 2 buildings here, like so. So in this case, we've got either the school in that case. So you see this is worth 2 additional points if you have more visible relics than both of your neighbors. So if you build that, then when we get to scoring, we're going to evaluate this particular bit of scoring. Whereas if we decided in this case to build the garden, this is worth 3 additional points if placed on a terrain segment of exactly 7 continuous spaces. Now you can see these also have their built-in sort of base scoring. So each of these is going to be worth 2 points each, like this. So let's say we build that here. Now the thing is, when you build a building, again, it has to go on top of a gear, like so, and it has to be within the same terrain. If I did this kind of example here, like so, you couldn't do this because they're different terrain. Easy enough. So you place a land tile and then add either a building or an inhabitant on top of that. And then at that point, you have one final step where you could use building power. So you can see these 2 buildings, they actually just score differently at the end of the game. Whereas this farm piece here, if we see this, so every time you place a building, place a junk token on a relic in one of your neighbor communities. And neighbors is anybody that's sitting to the immediate left and right of you. So a 2-player game, you're both each other's neighbors. 3-player game, everybody's neighbors with the person to their left and right. 4-player game, there'll be one person across the table that is not your neighbor. So when this says, a couple of things to keep in mind. So place a junk token, I showed you those. So here is the junk token. Again, they're double-sided with a relic. Anything that we see here that has one of these icons like this, basically anything that's not a gear token is a relic. So after I have built a farm, anytime later that I build a building, I can take a junk token and cover up somebody's relic there. And again, relics, whether they're printed or one of these that maybe gets placed on the board due to some effect, is worth 1 point at the end of the game. Any junk token is worth -1. So if I did this to somebody, not only are they losing the point for now they no longer have the relic, they're also losing another point because they got a junk token on top of it. And once you do that, once you've put a land tile out, placed a building or an inhabitant, and then you activated any powers you have, then you will refresh the market of the tiles on the side, and then that's the end of the turn. And it goes until everybody has built a 4x4 grid here, and then everybody gets equal number of turns, and then that will be the end of the game and you'll score up. The only other kind of tile here is this one here. This is an energy source. So this one, once you have surrounded it on all sides, then it's going to be worth 8 points at the end of the game. So basically, if it's on one of your edges, it's not going to score you anything. You want to get this kind of in the center of your display there, and those will score you 8 points once you surround them. But you can also see they kind of break up, you know, the terrain and stuff like that, so you won't be able to build anything, you know, too tricky with this thing in play. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, you know, juggling all of this decision-making space for yourself. And we'll just go ahead and take a look here at how you score everything, just as a reminder. And this will give you kind of a familiarity with some of the concepts and the terms and give you a sense of the strategy here. So the first thing you're going to score is a terrain segment of 7+ spaces. Now, if you remember here, we had this garden. This is worth an additional 3 points on top of the 2 if it's in exactly a segment of 7 spaces. So when we talk about segment, we're talking about a segment of terrain. So if we did this like so, let's just put this out here like that, and then we'll just put this one here, right? So if we take a look here, we have now spaces. Each of these individual squares is a space, but a segment is a continuous terrain segment that is all the same. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so that is a segment size 6. So it would not score here, this one, because it's 7+ spaces. But if we added another forest, you know, that was adjacent here, then we would be able to score that. So for each of those segments, you get 3 points. The next one, the energy sources, what I explained here, these tiles like so, those get 8 points when you surround them. Here we go, relics. The icons and the tokens themselves, those are worth 1 point. The inhabitants themselves that you place out are worth 1 point. The buildings will score differently based on, you know, what you've set up for the game. And again, the junk is going to be worth -1 point. You total that up, and then that is going to be the winner of the game. And again, the variability is going to come into play here with the various different building types here. So let's just look at this example, the school. Again, 2 additional points if you have more visible relics than both your neighbors. if we flip that over even, worth 1 point for each different type of visible relic in your community. So this is going to sort of be more of an exponential type of scoring. Whereas this one, like, is providing you sort of a race to get more relics than your neighbors. This one is telling you to get relics, but different types. And multiple schools will score multiple times with this. So worth 1 point for each different type. And again, the types here are these different icons. So this is one type. This is another type here. We got another one over here. This guy here. So that's another type of relic. So you can see how it will sort of vary up your strategies based on which cards you have set up. And you've also got these other sets of buildings here. Okay, so that is Life in Reterra. Let's just jump into my pillars of review. First, talk player count. Only played it 2 and 3 player, not played it 4. I don't think the player count itself matters too much because it seems to scale pretty well, at least in the 2 and 3 player game. The time it takes to play it doesn't seem to really vary at all. Maybe it takes slightly longer with 3 than 2 and probably 4 than 3, but not a lot. This is a game you can get played about a half hour, definitely with 2 players, half an hour, up to about 45 minutes, especially as people, you know, learn the game, learn the strategies, learn kind of the space that they have to kind of explore. That time's going to come down even further. Like the last couple times I played a 2 player really quick, right at a half an hour. And so that talks about playtime as well. My first 2 pillars of review. If you ask me what I prefer, I don't know. It kind of depends on the cards that are set up. I think the way you do the card setup, that will kind of inform the game style a little bit. So if it's a little bit more interactive and kind of mean, probably prefer it at the 2 player count because it's a little bit more like chess, tug of war type of thing, you know, back and forth. Whereas, you know, sometimes with a multiplayer thing, it gets a little irritating if somebody is like, you know, always giving you the junk and negative things or whatever, that kind of thing. So it kind of depends on the setup, but I really like it as a 2 player game. I think it works really well because it also gives you the advantage, I think it's an advantage, of being able to kind of see what they're going for and sort of, you know, the term is called hate drafting, where you kind of say, well, this isn't really going to score me a ton of points, but I need to kind of stop their engine a little bit, and so I'll take a building tile that fits there, or certain types of relics and things like that that I might draft out of the land tiles based on the scoring cards and that kind of thing. So in a 2 player space, that works really well. Now it doesn't not work well with the 3 and probably the 4 player count, but there are certain setups that I find that are really good for 2 player. And I think, you know, the game, like I showed you, gives you the thing in the book at the back, so you can kind of play around with that stuff too, you know, because these opinions that I have about different player counts and, like, you know, meaner games or more solitaire games and that kind of stuff, like that perspective, that attitude is meant to be broken, right? And I'm not going to marry myself to that either, because there's going to be a day where I like, well, let's play the meanest setup possible with 4 people and it's still going to be fun, right? Because everybody's going to be on the same page. So anyway, I'm just trying to give you a perspective about that. I just want to be a little bit careful about like making it sound like a decree, because even in myself, I'm like, no, I would like to do that with, you know, these different setups in my head as I'm talking about it. But the nice thing about the game, one of the really great things about the game, and this will get into like my 3rd pillar, what is this game like? And one thing I think sets this apart from some other tile placement games is that setup. And, you know, just flipping the cards around, there's so many ways to set this up, and it's really cool, and it makes you really explore the space differently. And that to me is like what the game's real achievement is. And I do think the game is an achievement. This game just came out of nowhere. So the Hasbro sent it to me with a copy of Talisman, which I think is the last game I reviewed. And I was like, what's this thing? I'm like, oh, Eric Lang. Okay, I know that guy. And then I started looking at it, and then we played it a few times, and I was like, this game's really good. And I think it's what I really like about this game. And I don't know if this is one of these games. I know Eric Lang has been public about sort of his desire or ambition to, you know, do kind of a more sort of family level, whatever you want to call it, casual, simpler design, you know, a little bit, you know, all these dumb words that reviewers like me use, elegant design, all that stuff, you know, kind of hit that mark with some of his newer games coming out. I don't know if this one falls in that category. I'm sure it does. I don't know if this is who he was developing stuff for or not. But this would hit that mark, I think. And I think it's a success there. I would recommend this for, kind of a family environment, a casual environment. I'd also recommend it for a gamer, advanced gamer environment. Because it is, it's like I said, it's only going to take like a half hour or so. But that's going to be a very enjoyable, solid, good little bits of crunch half hour. And there's a lot to really sort of explore here. So I've talked enough about like the cards and the setup and all that stuff. The one other key part of it is the land tiles. Okay, so now you get 3 of them in your hand, and then you don't get any others, and you're dealing with this public pool here that you've got to pull out of. But based on like those 3 tiles that you have in your hand, based on the terrain that's displayed there, how it's arranged, the icons you may or may not have on there, that gives you what could be kind of a purely tactical game. It gives you just that little dusting of long-term strategy based on that. So that can kind of help you, get around a little bit. And that also might be I favor a little bit more the lesser player count, because that market of land tiles, it's going to have less turnover, So whatever, neither here nor there. But the way that that's handled by just giving you a little bit of a hand, they could have easily not done that. I could see this game, I can almost picture this game shipping without a hand of tiles. And then just doing it like that. And I don't think it would be as good of a game as it is without that. Because like I said, it gives you that little long-term strategy piece. And the way that everything kind of scores itself, it has that kind of like Dominion aspect and kind of the deck building aspect kind of vibe where, you shuffle up a setup and you kind of have this, okay, now how is the best way to score points out of what, we've done on our random setup. It's not like deck building at all, but that whole initial setup, okay, what do we got? And then you can jump right into it. That part of it's really cool. So at first you're kind of like learning just what the game is giving you, right? But then play that setup a second time. Now you start to interact with the players more, because you're like, okay, Billy gonna be taking that tile, Francesca's gonna be taking this other thing. If I can deny that icon from them, it's still got maybe the 2 terrain sides that are pretty convenient for me, and you're kind of like working on this side of your map, and then over down here you got another side of the map going on, and you're trying to like, okay, well I want to get some bigger terrain spaces, the sections with the different same terrain, and the whole arranging stuff. So the game is kind of simple enough in its loop. Land tile, building tile, maybe activate a power, go. Land tile, building tile, go, right? Or not, maybe don't do a building tile at all for a couple of the turns. And it's always like the same number of turns. So that real elegant, precise loop, you still kind of, fairy dusted with a lot of cool, call it complexity in terms of the scoring. So there's going to be a lot of nice replayability here and all that good stuff. And like I said, you still got that little bit of long-term stuff. So yeah, I totally recommend this game. Didn't know anything about it till it showed up, and I was very pleasantly surprised by this, and I definitely recommend it. I think you can get this at like a Target, maybe Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, that kind of big box store. I believe that they're trying to put this stuff in. A friend of mine said he saw it at Target, and so I think it's reasonably priced, in that regard, since it's hitting that big box market, so you can go out and find it there. And the components and everything, the art's really cool, and everything's good quality components and everything. So I definitely recommend this one wholeheartedly. Check it out, Life in Reterra. Thanks.